I never expected a routine visit from a cop to turn into something so intense. When he showed up at my door, I thought it was just another standard call. But what happened next? I never saw coming. His presence left me breathless. And that moment changed everything. Let me take you back to where it all began. I wasn't someone who sought attention, especially not from strangers. My life moved in quiet, predictable rhythms, my job, my routine, and the peaceful solitude of my apartment. That was all I needed, or so I kept telling myself. Most days, I convinced myself that I didn't want anything more. But there were moments, fleeting, quiet ones, where something inside me stirred. A longing, maybe. A need for connection I tried hard to ignore. Every time it surfaced, I pushed it down, telling myself it didn't mean anything. That is, until the knock. It was late afternoon when I heard it. Just a light tap, but sharp enough to pull me out of the haze I'd been floating in. I wasn't expecting anyone, which made it all the more unsettling. I glanced at the clock, for 15 p.m. No deliveries. No friends or family. I sighed and dragged myself off the couch, bracing for some minor inconvenience. But when I opened the door, I wasn't prepared for him. Officer Chase stood there, tall, composed, uniform crisp, badge catching the faint light of the hallway. At first glance, he looked like any other cop. Serious. Official. Detached. But there was something different about him. Something I couldn't quite explain. His eyes, soft but observant, met mine. And something inside me shifted. "Good afternoon, sir," he said. His voice was calm, smooth, but carried the kind of quiet authority that made my chest tighten. "I'm Officer Chase. We've had a complaint about some noise from this unit. Just need to check on a few things, if that's all right." There was nothing threatening about him. But the space between us felt heavier. Charged in a way I couldn't understand. I nodded and stepped aside. "Of course." "Come in," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could already feel something stirring beneath my skin. As he walked past me, I noticed the way his uniform fit him, not in an obvious way, but in the subtle tension of his shoulders, the quiet sound of his boots on the floor. He moved with purpose, as if he had control of the space around him. And in that moment, I became sharply aware this man was a stranger. But somehow, he made me feel completely unsteady. "Mind if I take a look around?" he asked, scanning the small living room. "No, go ahead," I replied a little too quickly, as if trying to cover the strange tension rising between us. I watched him as he moved, each step measured, each glance deliberate. He was clearly focused on his job. But something in the way he carried himself, it drew me in. His presence filled the room in a way I hadn't expected. The visit didn't last long. He checked the windows, asked a few polite questions about the neighbors, glanced around the space. Nothing unusual. Just doing his job. But it felt personal somehow. His eyes lingered a second too long when he asked if I'd had any issues with noise. His voice lowered, barely, but enough for me to notice. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything. He was polite. Professional. Distant. But there was an undercurrent beneath every word, every glance, a quiet tension I didn't know how to interpret. As he turned to leave, he paused in the doorway. His eyes found mine one more time. "Thanks for your time," he said with a faint smile. "If anything comes up, don't hesitate to call." His words were ordinary. But the way he said them wasn't. "Sure. Of course," I mumbled. The door clicked shut behind him, and I stood there, staring at the spot where he'd been. Something lingered. A strange feeling that settled in my chest, part confusion, part something I couldn't name. "It's just a cop," I told myself. But I kept remembering the way he looked at me. The quiet confidence in his voice. The way the air felt heavier when he was near. That feeling didn't go away. In fact, over the next few days, it only grew stronger. I kept replaying the encounter in my head, those brief moments when our eyes met. The softness in his voice. The way his presence seemed to take up space inside me, even after he was gone. It was like he had left something behind. A part of himself that stayed with me. I tried to brush it off as nothing. Just a passing attraction. But the truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about him. And little did I know, I wasn't the only one. The memory of that afternoon stayed with me like a whisper I couldn't shake. I kept telling myself it didn't mean anything. Just a routine visit. Nothing more. But the way Officer Chase had looked at me, really looked at me, he kept surfacing at the worst times. So when the doorbell rang again one night, late, sharp, urgent, I nearly dropped the glass I was holding. My stomach twisted. I froze, listening. No second ring. Just silence. Then, a knock. 3 quick, impatient raps. Something wasn't right. I opened the door. And there he was. Officer Chase. But not like before. His uniform was slightly disheveled. His breathing uneven. And under the dim hallway light, I could see a thin line of blood trailing from a scrape near his temple. One hand gripped the doorframe like he was trying to stay upright. "Hey," he said, his voice lower than usual. Sorry for just showing up like this." For a second, I just stared at him, my mind scrambling to understand what was happening. Looking at him, I saw that his usual composure had cracked. Not completely, but just enough to make my pulse jump. "What happened?" I asked, stepping aside without even thinking. "Are you?" "I'm fine," he said quickly, letting out a breath and shaking his head. Some idiot broke into a house down the block. I was already in the area when the call came in. When I showed up, he bolted. Ran right past me, clipped me on the way. He touched his temple briefly. Then scoffed. "Slippery bastard got away." I frowned, glancing past him into the hallway, half expecting to see signs of a chase, footprints, something. But everything was still. Just the soft buzz of the light overhead and a TV murmuring from another apartment. "Are you sure you're okay?" I asked again, more firmly this time. "Yeah," he exhaled, rubbing a hand down his face before giving me a look I couldn't quite read. "I just need a second. Maybe a drink, if you've got one." That caught me off guard. But before I could say anything, he shifted his weight, just slightly. A subtle wince, a faint lean into the doorframe. It was enough to show that he wasn't as fine as he wanted to seem. I didn't hesitate. "Come in," I said, stepping aside more fully this time. He didn't argue. Walked past me with the same careful control as always, but there was a weight to him now that hadn't been there before. As I shut the door, I caught a faint scent, sweat, adrenaline, something sharp still lingering from whatever had just happened. He moved to the dining table and sank into the chair without waiting for permission, leaning back slightly, one hand rubbing the side of his neck. I headed to the kitchen, grabbed a glass, filled it with water. "Sorry about the doorbell," he said, his voice drifting toward me. "Didn't mean to make it sound like a damn emergency." "It's fine," I replied, setting the glass in front of him. "Though for a second, I thought you were about to knock the whole door down." That earned a faint smirk. But he just shook his head and picked up the glass. His fingers wrapped around it, but he didn't drink right away, just stared at the water like it held answers. Then, finally, he brought it to his lips and drank deeply. I sat across from him, watching the way his throat moved as he swallowed, the slow release of tension from his shoulders. The scrape on his temple still looked fresh, the skin around it red and raw. "You should clean that," I said quietly. He reached up without thinking, fingertips brushing the wound. "It's nothing. I've had worse." "That doesn't mean you should walk around with dried blood on your face," I said, sharper than I meant to. I stood and walked toward the bathroom. A moment later, I returned with a warm washcloth. He looked up at me, something flickering behind his eyes, but he didn't argue. He took it, pressed it gently to the scrape, wincing. You a medic or something, he muttered. I huffed. No. Just not an idiot. That earned another smirk, this one slower, something more behind it. Amusement, maybe. Or something else entirely. He leaned back again, exhaling. You ever have one of those nights where everything feels like it's moving too fast, but also too slow at the same time? I frowned. Yeah. I think so. That's what this feels like, he muttered. 1 second I'm chasing someone down. Next second I'm here. He drummed his fingers against the side of the glass, then looked at me. And I don't even know why I came to your door. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. The way his voice dropped at the end. The way his eyes didn't waver. He didn't say it like an apology. He said it like a realization. I swallowed. Maybe you just needed a place to catch your breath. He held my gaze for a long, quiet moment. Then finally, he nodded. Maybe. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, but it was charged. Like something unspoken stretched between us. A thread pulled tight, but not quite breaking. He set the now empty glass down, fingers tapping against it once before he stood. I should go, he said, though he didn't move right away. Thanks for the water. I stood too. But neither of us moved toward the door. His eyes flicked over me, just briefly. Then he exhaled, rolled his shoulders. Take care, all right. You too, I murmured. He hesitated for just a second. Then turned and walked toward the door. I followed, watching as he opened it and stepped out into the dim hallway. But before he disappeared, he glanced back. If they catch the guy, I'll let you know, he said, softer now, as if the walls might be listening. I nodded. Yeah. Okay. And then, he was gone. I stood at the door for a long moment, trying to steady my thoughts. The apartment felt different now. As if something had been left behind. And I had the strangest feeling, this wouldn't be the last time he came to my door. And I was right. What happened next changed everything. The days that followed Officer Chase's visit settled into a strange rhythm. I went through the motions, work, errands, scrolling through my phone. But no matter how much I tried to distract myself, my thoughts kept circling back to that night. To him. I told myself it was nothing. He'd been hurt, needed a breather, and I happened to open the door. That was all. But the way he'd looked at me before he left, that stayed with me. It gnawed at the edges of my thoughts. Quiet, but insistent. More than once, I caught myself glancing at the door, half expecting another knock. And every time sirens echoed in the distance, my heart reacted, not with fear, not with relief. Something else. Something I didn't want to name. I hated that my body had started responding at the mere thought of him. A week passed. Just as I'd convinced myself that whatever had happened was a fluke, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. But somehow, I already knew. Hello? Hey. It's Officer Chase. His voice sent a jolt through me, but I forced myself to sound casual. Hey. What's up? I know this is a little out of the blue, he said, his tone careful, but I'm working on some paperwork at the precinct. Your name came up in a routine follow-up. Nothing serious. Just need a quick signature. He paused. Would you mind if I stopped by? I hesitated, not because I didn't want to see him. I did. And that was exactly the problem. There was no reason for my chest to feel tight. No reason for my pulse to race over paperwork. But before I could stop myself, I said, yeah. Sure. What time? I'll be there in about half an hour. When the call ended, I just stared at my phone, thoughts spinning. This was just work. Just a visit. No reason to read into it. And yet, 30 minutes later, I was standing by the door, pretending I wasn't waiting for him. When the knock finally came, it was softer than before. No urgency. No tension. Just two quiet knocks, hesitant. I swallowed hard and opened the door. There he was. Still in uniform. But something was different. His usual guard was lowered. His posture was relaxed, almost uncertain. For a moment, he just stood there, looking at me like he wasn't quite sure why he'd come. "Hey," he said, his voice softer than I remembered. I nodded and stepped aside. "Hey." He walked in slowly, I scanning the room like he was seeing it for the first time. Something had shifted. I could feel it. He could, too. I cleared my throat, needing to say something, anything. "So, what's this about?" "Right," he said, blinking like he'd forgotten. He pulled out a clipboard. "Just need your signature. Follow up on that noise complaint you filed." I raised an eyebrow. "You could have had me sign this at the precinct." A small smirk tugged at his lips, but he hid it quickly. "Yeah. I guess I could have." I reached for the clipboard, and our fingers brushed. Just a touch. But it sent a spark up my arm. Instant. Sharp. Unmistakable. He felt it, too. I knew he did. Because his breath hitched. Barely. But I caught it. He pulled his hand back quickly, clearing his throat. "Sorry." "It's fine," I murmured, gripping the clipboard tighter. I focused on signing, pretending I wasn't aware of his eyes on me the entire time. Watching. When I handed it back, he hesitated. Then slowly took it from me. A silence stretched between us. Not awkward. Just full. He shifted, then exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, I didn't want this. I don't want this to be weird." I frowned. "What do you mean?" His jaw tightened slightly before he met my eyes. "I don't know what it is about being here, with you," he said slowly, voice low. "But every time I leave, it feels like I'm walking away from something I haven't finished. And every time I show up, it feels like I shouldn't be here. But I can't stay away." My stomach clenched. I wasn't sure if it was nerves or something else. "I shouldn't be here like this," he continued, almost too quiet. "But I keep coming back." His words settled between us, heavy and unspoken. I swallowed hard. "You're not the only one who feels that way." Something shifted in his expression, relief, maybe. But also hesitation, like he hadn't expected me to say it aloud. We stood there, neither of us moving. The space between us crackled, full of something neither of us could name. And just when I thought he might say something more, just when the moment seemed to tilt toward something real, he stepped back. "I should go," he murmured. I didn't stop him. Even though a part of me wanted to. He hesitated for a moment longer, then nodded and turned toward the door. But before he stepped out, he glanced back. "If they catch the guy," he said softly, "I'll let you know." Then he was gone. I stood in the quiet that followed, the air thick with everything we hadn't said. And I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. What came next, I couldn't put into words. The deep stillness of night wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. The soft hum of the fridge, the quiet tick of the clock, everything felt louder in the silence. I'd been lying in bed for what felt like hours, but sleep wouldn't come. My thoughts circled the same point again and again. Officer Chase. I could still feel the tension from our last encounter. The weight in his voice. The restraint. It wasn't just duty that brought him to my door, it couldn't be. But neither of us had said it. We just kept hovering between the lines of what we felt and what we allowed ourselves to admit. I exhaled hard, rubbing my face like I could reset my mind. Then, 3 sharp knocks echoed through the apartment. I froze. It was late. Too late for someone to be knocking. Maybe I imagined it. Knock. Knock. Louder this time. Urgent. My heart jumped. I threw off the covers and padded to the door, my pulse thudding in my ears. I didn't hesitate. I opened it. And there he was. Officer Chase. But not the way I'd seen him before. No crisp uniform. No badge in place. His tie was undone, sleeves rolled up, shirt wrinkled like he'd been running his hands through his hair too many times. He looked unmoored. Frustrated. But his eyes were dark with something else. Something that made my stomach twist. What happened? My voice came out steadier than I felt. He didn't answer at first. Just glanced past me into the apartment, scanning the space like he needed to be sure. Then his gaze landed on me again. "We got him," he said, voice low. "The guy who broke into your neighbor's place. He's in custody." I blinked. "Wait, the one who clipped you?" He nodded, jaw tight. "Yeah. But there's more. We think he wasn't working alone." The words hit hard. A cold edge crept through my body. "What do you mean?" I asked. Chase exhaled, running a hand through his hair. He had a burner phone. We couldn't trace his last call. We don't know who else was involved, or if they're still out there. Watching. His eyes found mine again, intense and unreadable. "I don't want you to be alone tonight." I should have been focusing on the situation, on the possible danger. But all I could hear was the way he said it. The rasp in his voice. The quiet urgency that had nothing to do with protocol. I took a step back. And he stepped inside without waiting. The door clicked shut behind him, and suddenly everything felt closer. Tighter. Charged. "Are you sure they were after me?" I asked, voice small. "I don't know," he said, jaw clenched. "But it doesn't feel random. The way he acted when we caught him, it was too specific." My breath caught. What if whoever else is out there comes back? His eyes locked onto mine. "That's why I'm here." The words weren't just protective. They were personal. He paused, softer now, almost to himself. "I couldn't leave without making sure you were okay." The way he looked at me, it undid something in me. Like he'd finally stopped holding back, and in that space, I could finally stop pretending too. "You didn't have to come," I said quietly. His eyes dropped to my hand. I did. Something cracked open between us. I reached out, my fingers barely brushing his wrist. The moment I touched him, I felt it. That pull. That low hum of something real and deep and impossible to deny. He inhaled sharply, body tensing beneath my touch. But he didn't move away. If anything, he leaned in. His fingers curled around mine, like it was instinct. Like he'd been waiting for this longer than he wanted to admit. My voice trembled. "I don't know what this is. But I can't ignore it anymore." His expression flickered with something I couldn't read. And then, before either of us could pull away, he moved. 1 second there was space between us. The next, I was pinned against the wall. His body pressed to mine. His breath brushing my lips. The heat radiating off him, swallowing me whole. His fingers threaded through my hair, tilting my head gently. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. "And I will." I didn't. I surged up, my mouth crashing into his. He groaned, deep and guttural, and just like that, something inside him broke open. He kissed me like he'd been waiting for this. Like he was starving. There was no hesitation, no second guessing. Just heat. Need. The release of night spent pretending. His hands gripped my waist, pulling me close, until not even air could fit between us. I gasped as he pressed harder against me, his mouth trailing fire along my jaw, his hand slipping under my shirt, urgent, desperate. He lifted me. Carried me to the couch. And when we landed, a tangle of limbs and breathless need, everything we'd been holding back finally spilled out. Clothes were discarded without care. And when we came together, it was wild. Messy. Real. And perfect. Because for the first time in forever, I wasn't second-guessing. I was right here. With him. And neither of us was running anymore. Afterward, after the heat and noise had faded, we collapsed beside each other. Still, tangled. Still breathless. The room was quiet. But everything felt full. His chest rose and fell against mine. His warmth soaked into my skin. And for once, I felt peace. No confusion. No fear. Just him. Here. But even in the quiet, I couldn't ignore what had just happened. The weight of it. The intensity. The meaning. It wasn't just about the moment. It was about everything that had led to it. Finally, after a long stretch of silence, he spoke. "You okay?" he asked, voice low and rough, like he didn't want to break whatever this was. I nodded, fingers gently tracing his chest. "Yeah. I think I am." But there was more beneath the words. A quiet truth neither of us had fully voiced yet. "I wasn't expecting this," he said after a pause. "I thought I was just doing my job. I didn't think it would turn into this." I heard the conflict in his voice. The line he'd crossed. The life he'd left behind to stand here. But he wasn't just Officer Chase anymore. He was just Chase. And we were both caught in something neither of us had planned for. I turned to face him, reaching for his hand, lacing my fingers through his. "I wasn't expecting it either," I whispered. "But now that it's happened, I don't want to pretend it didn't. I don't know what this is or where it's going. But I want to find out. With you." He stared at me for a long time. Like he was searching for something. Like he didn't quite trust it, but wanted to. And then he exhaled. Slowly. Like he was letting go of something he'd been carrying for far too long. "Neither am I," he said. Voice barely above a whisper. "I've been holding back for so long, but now I can't." He kissed me again, slower this time. Deep. Tender. Full of promise. When we finally pulled back, our foreheads rested together. The room was still. Quiet. But in that silence, I felt everything. The weight of what had happened. And the anticipation of whatever came next. "I don't know what's ahead," he said softly. "But I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere." I smiled, brushing my thumb over his knuckles. "Neither am I." And in that moment, it didn't matter what tomorrow might bring. All that mattered was him. Here. With me. What mattered was the here and now, the way his body felt against mine, the way we seemed to fit together like puzzle pieces that had been waiting their whole lives to be found. The world outside could wait. There was only this moment. Only us. Whatever came after, we'd figure it out together. As we lay there, wrapped in each other's arms, the sounds of the city faded into the background. All I could hear was the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against mine. The future still felt uncertain. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. I closed my eyes, letting myself drift, finally allowing myself to feel safe, to let go, because whatever happened next, we'd face it together. And for the first time in forever, I wasn't afraid. I still didn't know what any of it meant, not completely. I didn't know where this was going, or how it might change us. But in that moment, lying there with him, I knew one thing for sure. I didn't regret a single second of it. Not one. And that's where my story ends, at least for now. But there's one question I keep turning over in my mind. Was this just an unexpected twist of fate? Or had we both taken a chance neither of us saw coming? And really, when it comes to moments like this, do we ever truly know what's right? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And thank you.